And welcome to this week's issue of the episode of the Dr. Tech Show, where myself, Pauline Roche, and Sweyn Hunter, and often guests, guide you to the world of online communications in a show which is the brainchild of the late, great John Popham. So we start with our special guest this week, Sharon Dale. Sharon, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. How are you and how's the weather where you are?
Not too bad. I'm feeling good, and the weather's not too bad either. We've had some really gorgeous weather the last few days, but it's not looking quite so nice today.
And
We're not
whereabouts are you
frosty,
in the
so
UK?
I'm
Sorry,
in Dorset, so I'm right on the near to the south coast, about 30 minutes away from the south coast.
lovely. And Sweyn, what about you?
I'm in Orkney as usual. The weather isn't very good. It's nice and bright, but we'll get sleet and snow and all sorts of wind and horrible weather this few days, but it'll soon pass.
Okay. And here in Birmingham, the ground is dry now. It was wet earlier, which I was surprised to see. But the sun is trying to break through the grey clouds, so hopefully we'll get out for a walk later and enjoy that. So today we are joined by Sharon Dale, who's a systems convener, and we'll come back to you, Sharon, in a moment, if you don't mind. We'll just go through some of our other usual things before we start. So Sweyn, if you want to lead off with the things you found during the week.
Well, I found a couple of awareness days this week, the first of which is called National Storytelling Week, and it's underway as of Saturday. This is now Monday, between the 29th of January and February the 4th. It's not international, I beg your pardon, it's a UK-wide National Storytelling Week, taking place in storytelling clubs, theatres, museums, schools, hospitals, spoken word venues, and care homes, which is the bit that interested me. And apparently it's been expanding in care homes each year. It's just what it says it is. It's a week to celebrate the telling of stories. Wherever the events take place, the web of stories will be spun with sufficient magic between the breath of the teller and the ear of the listener, it says. The week is celebrated by all ages, enjoying folk tales, fairy lore, figments, phantoms, dragons, serpents, storms at sea, and everything else. And it's promoted by the Society for Storytelling, which is active in running events throughout the UK all year round. They say, remember, everyone has at least one story to tell. It exists in the very air around you. Your story is the one you know best. And as it is only the beginning, the stories you tell might begin with once upon a time, or not in my time, not in your time, but in someone's time, and so on it goes. And right. John Popham, our founder, was a great guy for emphasizing the need for us all to tell stories, no matter what we're doing. Tell the story of what's going on. Don't just use dry data. So that was where we are with that one. And
yeah, that was very good. In Ireland, we start stories in Irish with Fado, which is similar a long time ago. Yeah, and it's great to hear that those kind of words they evoke memories already, you know, when you're ready to hear a good story. And they talk more about this in work now, don't they, as well, where telling the story of something really makes a difference. It's not, you know, it brings something to life, it makes it relatable, and that's what people talk about. Yeah. So yeah, good storytelling is important.
So the second awareness slot that we've got today is it is National Dignity Action Day, and that's on the 1st of February, which is, I think, tomorrow, Tuesday. And this is an annual opportunity for health and social care workers and members of the public to uphold people's rights to dignity and provide a truly memorable day for people who use care services. Dignity Action Day gives everyone the opportunity to contribute to upholding people's rights to dignity and provide a truly memorable day for people receiving care. The day aims to ensure that people who use care services are treated as individuals and are given choice, control, and a sense of purpose in their daily lives. Dame Joan Bakewell, who's their Dignity in Care ambassador, said, Dignity Action Day highlights a more respectful way of behaving towards vulnerable people. The very old and the very young clearly need our respect, but it wouldn't do any harm to spread the dignity message across the population. Then we can all benefit. So supporting the day will raise awareness of the importance of dignity in care, provide someone with an extra special day, demonstrate that everyone in the community has a role to play in upholding dignity in care, remind the public that staff have a right to be treated with dignity and respect too, and it'll provide a great community networking opportunity. So on this day, the ask is that health and social care workers promote dignity in their place of work, and they also ask that members of the public promote dignity for people in their communities. And there's a flyer and resource packs on the website there that I've got on the screen.
Brilliant. Very important.
So that was another one. And finally, the third thing today is an event that's going on in Manchester a week today, I think. No, yes, on the 7th of February. And it's the Digital Skills Festival Conference. It's a Manchester-focused event, and it takes place in person there on the 7th of February from 1 p.m. till 6:30, with the opportunity to network with others who are there. And the Digital Skills Festival Conference is for industry professionals, education experts, and policymakers to discuss and share strategies for tackling the skills issues facing our industry. They'll consider topics such as employment in Manchester, growth areas, and some emerging technologies. And along with a keynote speech from Craig Fenton, who's the Director of Strategy and Operations for the UK and Ireland at Google, they'll be looking at the digital age is more than ever a human age, the future of technical education. And they'll also be sharing findings from this year's National Digital Skills Audit, which we've mentioned on this programme. And they'll be looking at the impacts on the industry and what it all means. And the attendance is free and is open to any digital business or education provider. So that's the Digital Skills Festival Conference on the 7th of February.
Great to see that happening, and I hope similar things are happening in other parts of the country, because it's, you know, we, as we know well from this show and in other places, digital skills were kind of a forgotten, and, you know, kind of people assumed you had digital skills maybe, or they didn't. It wasn't something that was taught, or something you kind of picked up along the way, and I think there's been gaps there. And Sharon, I'm sure you've come across that in your work, and you note that kind of people's digital skills vary, and how do people measure them even?
Most definitely. I think that, as you said, it's assumed a lot of the time, and you know, generally if someone is at work and it's assumed that they have certain skills, they don't feel confident saying, no, I don't, and I need help with this thing. And so you just end up with a situation which just festers and gets worse until someone comes along who can help that person, or you think about it in a different way. Yeah.
And in my work now, I'm coming across older people who are having to kind of pretend to some extent, or to feel left out and incompetent because they don't have digital skills, and they just end up feeling bad about themselves. And of course that affects their learning. If you feel bad, you can't learn very well, I think. And kind of I'm constantly encouraging them to blame the technology, you know, blame the fact that they weren't you know, taught these skills at a younger age, and then just to kind of know that they can learn something even, you know, over 50, and you know, and develop and get to enjoy, you know, what some of the rest of us take for granted. So Sharon, welcome to the program. Just a bit by introduction, let me say that Sharon is a systems convener, and she brings together groups from across the system and helps them to work together to make their efforts successful. This is usually in the role of trainer, facilitator, team coach, or workshop designer. She has considerable experience of working with senior leaders from across the public sector, and Sharon is skilled at selecting and using a range of methods and tools to enable a group to communicate and work together in the most effective way possible. So Sharon, we've known each other a few years through local gov camp, I'd say, is probably where we've kind of come across each other. I think Sweyn was saying the same, that's where you and he have met in the past. We actually were together only this past Friday. So do you want to say a bit about that and what that was about?
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much for inviting me, by the way. Lovely to see you both twice in 4 days. It's amazing. So on Friday, I ran an experiment. So I'm a big one for experiments, and it kind of speaks to the things that you were talking earlier on about people being unsure about things. If you call something an experiment, it's a lot easier for them to try something and be okay with it not working okay. And I needed to be okay with this not working okay, although it did. So the idea was that when we're together in an office, even if we're not working directly with someone or speaking to someone, we can see someone across the office, and it's just a bit of company. Or you could go to ask someone something or whatever. And I've heard lots of people recently saying that they miss that. They're in their back bedroom, or their only bedroom, or their front room, or wherever, and away from their colleagues. And I think again that it encourages some of this, oh, I'm okay, I'm doing okay, I'm getting on with my work, and that kind of thing. And so I thought that it'd be a good idea to try having a virtual co-working session. So I found a tool which is called Wonder, and it's a virtual space. And unlike Teams and Zoom and Skype and tools like that, where we have a meeting together, these types of tools, they replicate what it's like to be in person a little bit more. So what it does is it allows you to move closer to people and further away from people, and have conversations, or just be in the same space as someone else and see their avatar and know that they're there. So we had 11 people sign up. I'd made it 12 maximum. And I think everybody except one managed to come along for some of the time. And again, the idea was that people would come when they were able to, not, you've got to be here from this time to this time. And so there we can see Sweyn in the session with a video. That chap that you can see to the right is actually a video. So it's a pre-recorded video that tells you how to use it. But when you first pop in, if you're not expecting to see anyone, it's a little bit strange. So what I did was set up some spaces for people to use so that we could have a quiet space, meeting room space, and broadly what happened is that people came in and they used the space. So we had some great conversations at the beginning, and then people kind of went off and did their own thing.
It was really good. When I arrived, it was so easy to get in, which I really enjoyed. And then it was so intuitive just to kind of stand next to somebody like you were in a social an office someplace, and then the circle would expand, and you would join each other in the same space, and it was just, I really enjoyed it. And I was comparing it to Remo, which is another space like this that Andy Sanford, who's been on this program before, kind of really likes and uses a lot, I think. But
my name's Andrew.
It felt friendlier somehow. Yeah,
I think
organic, it seemed to me. I mean, I'm a great fan of Remo for certain types of events, but for just a hangout, which is nearly what it's a kind of work-based hangout event that you were running on Friday, I thought it worked really, really well. And I also think it would work really well for the kind of informal unconference type gov camp, bar camp type events as well. I think that would be really good platform as long as everyone could access it. There's some question about how good it is on mobile devices. I think that would need to be looked at.
That's right, yeah.
But in general, I thought it was just, this is my feedback for you, Sharon, live in real time. I thought it was absolutely excellent. And I look forward to using it again for various different things.
Yeah, people who weren't able to come but saw it on Twitter said, "Are you going to be doing this every weekday?" And I said, well, let's see, and certainly it seems that there's a bit of a demand for this kind of thing. And maybe we could just, the space could be there and could be left open, and you could just chat to Andrew the video if no one else turns up. But what I liked about it was absolutely, as you say, it's low friction. And to your point about whether people can access it or not, one of the ladies who came along said, can you send me a link so I can test that it works on my device, because she worked in central government, and it did. So that was a good sign. Good. I need to test it with my special person who is very locked down, who I test everything with. I need to send it off to her to see if she can get into it. But anything like that.
When you say very locked down, Sharon, can you explain to some people who might not be aware of what that might mean?
Yeah, so a lot of people who I've worked with in the past have worked in government departments, and who for good reasons, are very risk averse around the technology that people can use. Because obviously, if anyone can join a meeting, then anyone can join a meeting, and if anyone can see information, then that could be problematic as well. So we need to be mindful of those things whenever we're considering a tool or a use of a tool.
Mm-hmm. And is it where does the tool come from? What country does it originate in?
That's a good question. I knew you were going to ask me that, and I knew I should have looked it up. I don't know.
I think it's US. I think it was
US.
US. I think I looked at the because it reminded me of another. Because I've got a friend who works at a tech company in Birmingham, and I think it's Wonder, but spelled with just WONDR. So I thought it was him, but it wasn't. It wasn't. So I think the people I saw were from the US. Yeah. So
I'm sure Sweyn's looking it up now.
I have that I'm Googling expression on my face.
Yeah, you do.
A little bit, yeah.
Here we are. This is from
also, you did tell me you were no,
go on.
The stories. I'm just going to say that you said you're a big manual reader.
Yes, I am. I absolutely am.
Yeah.
I obsessively read the instructions for things. So I'm not sure.
We both do that, and we look at the about pages and things, and sort of having librarianship in the background. Well, this is $11 million there, so I think that's where I first assumed it was an US one. But
they've now have a worldwide community of 3.8 million users, only 2 of which are me. So
yeah. So it reminded me of when the Impact Hub was working in Birmingham. I'm sure you both know of that.
Mm-hmm.
I was based there for 5 years from when it opened to when it closed, and it actually reminded me of experiences I've had there, which I think is a great compliment to it, because they were some of the best years I've had in my working life. So yeah, that feeling, being able to generate that feeling again. I mean, it helped obviously that you were there, Sharon and Sweyn, and people I knew and liked. But yeah, it did feel very convivial.
What I was really impressed by was Pauline and I generally have a chat. We call it an editorial meeting. Sounds very grand for this program on a Friday. And so since we were both going to be there, I wondered if it would be possible to do the meeting there. And it just absolutely worked. We just moved our little avatars together. The video call started. We had our normal chat in the normal way. We shared screens or not, and all the rest of it. And then when we were finished with that, we moved the little avatars on the screen apart again. The conversation stopped, and then we could go off and either work quietly or meet with somebody else. It's just absolutely works.
And we've become used to kind of having meetings like this where somebody with technical knowledge has to move you around, or and there was none of that friction, as you said. So that worked really well.
Struck me, Pauline, that if we could live stream one of the meetings in the Wonder Me room, we could do the whole show on Wonder Me, but maybe that's taking it a bit far.
Something we can look into. Yeah. So Sharon, let's kind of go back in time then and kind of look at your we're always interested in where our guests started their digital career, if you like. So can you tell us a bit about your early life in digital and how it's got you to where you are now?
Sure, I'll try and give you the shorter version because we could be here all day. We haven't got all day. Interestingly, I will start right at the beginning though. When I was 16, I left school, and for people like me, the job thing, the opportunities were really nursing or secretary, and neither of those, definitely not nursing. I didn't want to go anywhere near that. I applied for jobs in London, and I was fairly close to London at the time, and I just took the first one that I got because I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and I became a telex operator, which is brilliant because it means that I can tell people I train that I used to be email for a large insurance, Lloyd's reinsurance company, because that's what it was. We were messaging to other organizations. Mm-hmm. People would come and put a piece of paper in the in tray. I would type it out and it would go off to someone, and then we'd get a reply back and I'd give it back to people, which obviously some of that is understandable to people and other people can't quite grasp it. Mm-hmm. I've done training in email in 1993. It was probably the earliest that we were kind of getting into that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. I worked in IT support, and I think that's kind of where my passion for helping people with technology, because that's what it is. It's not, for me, it's not about technology. It's about enabling people to be able to do something with that technology.
This is why we all get on with you so well, Sharon.
Yes, absolutely.
We're all a bit like that.
Fellow travellers,
It's about people. And and that was really enjoyable. Also, I'm a bit of a fixer. I like it, when things all go wrong, that's when I kind of step forward and, kind of grasp my metal and get on with it. I did IT support for a while. I then started to do some project management. And then I had a bit of a career change. What happened is that my other half was looking for a job. He'd circled a job in the newspaper. He was a facilities manager. I went, oh, that looks interesting. I think I could do that. He said, I bet you couldn't. You wouldn't get it. And I went, right. So I got it. So I spent 4 fabulous years working, running a building with digital businesses in it, which was really interesting. And it was about service provision. It wasn't about facilities management at all. Obviously, I had to make sure that the toilets were clean, but it was more about, how can we help these people to run their businesses? And as you said earlier, Pauline, about the Impact Hub, it was very similar to that. It was, people had their own little offices, but there was a fabulous interview that was done by one of our clients, and she talked about the serendipity of being in that space, and that was why they were there. It wasn't the cheapest place in Leeds, but what it meant was that they bumped into people in the atrium or at meetings or events or whatever. And so it was always about thinking, how can we do something which will help these businesses to be successful? And so I loved that, did that for about 4 years. And then after that, I went freelance. So since 2012, I think, probably, I've been freelance. And in 2014, I was invited by Matt Edgar, who you probably know, who works now at NHSX, to help him with a thing for the government digital service, which was called the Service Manager Programme at the time. And that was, so my career has kind of been before government and after government. And so that is kind of the crossing point. And so since then, I've been working with people in the public sector. And again, this was a new job. They needed to work differently. They were using agile techniques, and needed to understand what that all meant. And so that, I spent 4 years working in doing lots of training and awareness stuff. And since then, continue to do some consulting and training and things like that, but all with the public sector.
Mm-hmm. So when you say agile, can you explain what that might mean to somebody who wouldn't be aware of it?
Yeah, no problem at all. So the way that we used to do projects is that, particularly in government and in large organizations, is that someone would have an idea. They buy into it in a big way. They try and get lots of other people to buy into it. They would get a big list of requirements. What is it that we want this thing to do? They wouldn't necessarily look at whether it was that good an idea or not. Some people would, some people wouldn't. And then they would give it to someone to go away and do, often software development, that kind of thing. And the thing would come back maybe 2 years, maybe 5 years later. By then, things probably have changed, and then give it to people and say, there, we've given you this marvelous thing. And people would go, great. Often it didn't work very well. Often it didn't meet the needs of the people who needed to use it. And so agile is something that it started about 25 years ago, but the phrase was coined in 2001 when some software developers who were working in this way already came together and decided to name what it was that they were doing. And the idea is that you look at what it is you're trying to do. You make sure that you're doing the right thing, that you're working incrementally and iteratively, so that you're building small and you're making sure that it works before you actually give it to someone. And a lot of the government things, we also add to that a lot of design. So we're designing things properly. Things are always designed. It's just whether they're designed by accident or intentionally. And user-centeredness. So we're doing user research and we're making sure that the things meet the needs of the people who need to use them. And so going from kind of big bang approaches, which obviously, we want to be able to say, ta-da, here's the thing that we built. But really, that's not a good way of doing it. So it's helping people to understand all of that. And again, helping people to be happier in the work that they do. I think I told you, Pauline, on Friday that one of the people that we trained, we did a really long 6-week foundation course. That's a big foundation course, isn't it? A lot of foundation. And we had one chap who was about to retire. And so I think he was sent on the course to give him something to do for a bit of time. He delayed his retirement for 4 years after that course because he just absolutely loved it, and he could see the benefit of working in this way. I think he has finally retired now. But, and I've seen it make a huge difference to lots of people because it's a totally different way of working. It's obviously difficult because it's about change. Change is difficult within organizations. But it's been the most satisfying work that I've done ever. And now I'm moving more into, at the moment particularly, what's really popular is ways of working when we're not together. So and throughout all the work that I've done since 2014, I talk about confidence, building people's confidence, building people's capability, and building community, because we can't do this stuff by ourselves. And I think one of the things that I see a lot is silos. Obviously in large organizations there's lots of silos, and it's really for me about knocking those silos down, helping people to work together, helping people feel confident about what they're doing and be proud and say, I can now do this thing, but with an experimental way of doing it, so they don't feel scared.
Yeah. So, we've had nearly 3 years, come out to 3 years now of lockdowns and various things. How has that affected the work that you do? Improved it, increased, decreased, change? What's happened for you?
Good question. So a few things have happened around that time. So I discovered some methods called liberating structures in about 2015, I think. And so I got really involved in that, and a lot of the community are in America. So we did lots of Zoom calls in 2016, 2017, which was great for me because when 2020 came along, I was really familiar with it. So one of the things we did was we tried to work out how we would take these things that worked really well in person and change them so that we could do them online. And sometimes that works really well, and other times it changes the thing so much that it doesn't really meet the need anymore. So there was lots of thinking about that. So in 2020, I was working at that point for an agency, and we'd done lots of things face-to-face in the office. And I went to Service Design and Government. It was the last event that I went to before the lockdown. And it was, about a week later, someone said, someone at Service Design and Government has tested positive for COVID. So please go home right now and don't come back. And we all we closed the offices from that Monday, which was a couple of weeks before the national lockdown. So then I was at home from that time. Being used to working online was really, really helpful. And so we did a lot of work within the organization about how to work online and how to work in and then when people were allowed back in the office, how to work in a hybrid way, which is trickier than all being online. And so I've done 2 or 3 pieces of work where I've been working remotely. I worked for a large organization that's based in Plymouth. You might be able to work out who that is. You want me to say?
Yeah.
Land Registry. So Her Majesty's Land Registry. And
I was going to say the Navy, but no.
That's it. Hold on. So I'm glad I cleared that up.
Yeah, thank you.
Also, some work with an agency of DEFRA, and those worked really, really well remotely. Another experience that I'd had that made that work better was that when I was working for the Department for Education, actually in Manchester, I think one day we had everybody in the office together, but most of the time our developers were remote. And so we'd worked out some really good ways of working together remotely. So, it takes a bit of time and you have to keep reminding people. And I think I said on Friday again that I'm good at nagging people. So when people forgot to hold the mic and talk into it, when they were talking before the mic reached them, I'd say, hold on, people can't hear you.
Yeah.
And eventually we got really slick at it. And then one day when we went from private to public beta, we had everybody in the office, and we went for lunch, which was very nice. But so we were used to working in those ways, and we were used to running things like retrospectives remotely and all of those things.
A retrospective, that's where you look over the bit of work you've just completed and you ask yourselves what's gone well and how it could be better and what still has to be done and all that sort of stuff within the agile methodology. Just struck me as you were speaking that the entire history of, as it were, government services being moved online, you could look at that through a lens of it being a general case of hybrid working. Because one of the things that strikes me about hybrid working is it kind of depends on how cohesive or otherwise, and how closed or open the group of people doing it are. If you've got a very cohesive, very closed group, like say a bunch of software developers working on the same project, then the challenges you have to overcome are probably less than if you have like a huge huge team distributed all over the countryside who do have to work together but don't meet very often and might know each other or might not. And it just seems to me that you can generalize that further to bring the public in. I want to access a service from this bit of local government. The hybrid work is, hopefully, the hybrid working that people do involves stuff in preparation for in-person meetings or video meetings, just as websites can either deal with the issue for a citizen or a customer, or it can lead on to actual interaction with stuff. So there's kind of similarities, or I'm trying to think of the term. They fit onto one another, these problems slightly. And I just, sorry, that is my moment of epiphany for today, just as you were talking. So that's quite interesting. And I think, it's really interesting to hear what you're saying about having been doing hybrid working before the pandemic. And I think I think there's something to be done for those of us who were trying to move in that direction beforehand, to try and make our influence felt as we come out of the pandemic. I mean, I know in England and even in Scotland now, the work at home, if you possibly can, advice is changing to carefully go back to the office. Well, that's the message in Scotland anyway. And so it's going to be really interesting how people with your experience and people with other experiences of hybrid working can try and retain the best elements of what we've been doing during the pandemic and try and move forward.
We're going to have Alistair Somerville on the programme at some stage in the future. He's done a lot of work on that particularly, and I think he has some interesting things to say. But I also think that there's something to be said for not always being in the office, for working from home or from another place or a co-working space, because, offices aren't necessarily the places where you're going to have your best ideas or feel most empowered to do, to do the things you need to do. So, I'm
one of the things I liked about Wonder Me, your Wonder Me experiment last week, was that it addresses head on some of the reasons why people say going back to an office is essential, like those water cooler moments, those moments in the kitchen, those moments as you pass each other in the corridor. Well, in actual fact, with a bit of imagination and a little bit of effort from all concerned, you don't need to do those interactions necessarily always in that way. I mean, I'm one who advocates this because I live in a Scottish island and hundreds of miles away from anybody else. And for me to physically meet with people is always very expensive or very time consuming, unless they happen to live on the same island, which not many do. So, there's all sorts of benefits and opportunities in even in those informal interactions that people seem to think that big buildings and with huge car parks are needed for. And it's one of the things I was really impressed with Wonder Me by what was that? There's another woman who I met at UK GovCamp. I think she was called Judy Rees.
Oh yeah.
Be focusing specifically not so much on hybrid work, but on actual hybrid events like meetings, conferences, whatever. And I think some of the ideas in her ebook are also worth looking at. It just kind of segments the problem a wee bit and tries to deal with different what you might call use cases, I guess. And so it's really interesting to see how much work is actually happening in that space as we go back to work, as we go back to the office, not back to work.
Yeah, I think you asked how much work I'd done. I've had a bit of time where I haven't been working because I've been doing some work with a government department, and one of the things that was difficult was how open they needed to be but weren't able to be. And I kind of got put off doing that work, so I stopped going for those contracts for a little while. And so what I've been focusing on is thinking about things that I can deliver myself. So things like, the ways of working stuff. So I did a session, I've done 2 sessions with this particular organization, one which was really focused on tools. So they wanted to know about, using Teams better, and they wanted to know about using other things. And so we did a specific session on that. And then because during the lockdown, particularly, they found some things problematic. We ran a session, which was about 3.5 hours last week, on, what is it about, working in the office, not working in the office, working remotely? What do you find works well? What do you find works difficult? And what we were hoping was to surface some of the challenges that the senior people were seeing, and it did. It was really good, and I used a couple of tools for that. So I used aha slides, which is very much like Mentimeter. So that's there are a number of tools in this space, and so these are really good for interaction during a meeting. You can have people together, people not together, and we all interact through the same method. Again, on another project I was working on for Barnsley Council, we had a big end of project show and share thing, and we had people in the room and we had people who couldn't come, again before the pandemic, and we used Mentimeter, which is one of the other ones, to do questions and answers, which meant that the people in the room weren't at an advantage when it came to asking questions, which is really good.
Really good.
And so
really
we use this tool, and what it enables you to do is ask questions and have them displayed in different ways when they get the results back. So I did things like word clouds, where I'd say, tell me, 3 things that are really good, or up to 3 things that are really good about working from home, and what's challenging about working from home, and what's challenging when someone else is working from home and you're in the office, and what's challenging when you're in the office and someone else is from home, and a few different things like that. And it was brilliant, and we came up with so we did that piece, and then I said, okay, pick one of those challenges and type it on this tool, which was Jamboard, which is it's a whiteboarding tool, and what we did was brainwriting, which is a technique. It's a bit like brainstorming, but if you were in person, what you do is you take a piece of paper. I have one here. I didn't prepare earlier, but it just happens to be here. And you would write your idea in response to a question at the top, and then you would hand it to the person to your right or to your left or whatever, and you'd all sit together and you'd look at what the person had said and you'd respond to that. So what it does is it gives you the opportunity to see what all the people ahead of you have said about this particular thing and respond to that. So it's a really nice way of coming up with ideas. And so we did that on Jamboard. So someone would put a sticky, and then someone else would put a sticky. And so we've got some really great things from that. And it came from the people themselves. It's not the leaders going, you need to be dressed a certain way when you're on a Zoom call, and you need to, turn your mic off, because people came up with those things themselves. So I can then give them a report back and say, this is what you all said.
Right.
So that worked really well.
Mentimeter is a very popular tool in the voluntary sector, and Kate White from Superhighways is a friend of mine who she uses it quite a lot, and it's great to see those things percolating into a sector that traditionally hasn't had the resources to, like the public sector, to build on it. And
I love the idea of tricks to allow the people in the room. Well, you can look at it 2 ways. I'll tell a little story about that in a minute. But allow the people in the room to be on a level playing field with the people who are attending virtually. And someone I was talking to in the last week or two mentioned that when they'd taken some event out of being online only and doing it with 15 people in a room and 7 people joining remotely, they were saying that the people in the room were wanting to join the remote event so that they could take part in the offline chat.
Yeah,
and that struck me as something really interesting, that people in the room had so much changed the way they thought about how they're active and how they're contributing to a meeting, that they wanted actually to bring parts of the online experience into the room. And I think that that's another straw in the wind from where I'm sitting that is very encouraging.
When I'm on a Zoom call now, I try and encourage people to have the chat open on the side so they can see all these kind of chats that are going on as well. And I think they enrich the experience. I was actually at a session on data management and control a while back with Mike Rose was working at the ODI, or has worked at the ODI, Open Data Institute. And we, at that time, again, we had people, this was before lockdown actually, for any of the lockdowns. We had people who weren't able to join the session in person, but they wanted to contribute still. And we used Trello. So people were able to kind of move things again in real time and see what the discussions were happening. So yeah, I think there's a range of very useful things that we've learned to use that should add to the sum of things. You know, it's when people start feeling left out, or that they are under pressure to use things that makes it less handy.
It's my hope that looking at some of these very experimental, really innovative things will let some organizations who are a bit more staid and traditional and risk averse, such as local government, which I work in most of the time, or whatever they are. And I would hope that those of us in those environments can possibly at least take some of the principles from some of these experiments and demonstrators and see if we can get them to work in teams, for example. There's lots of little bits and pieces of teams that you can use for all sorts of things, and everyone the correct view of Teams from those who don't use it is that it's terrible, and it is quite inflexible as configured in most organizations. But with a bit of effort and a bit of comparing of notes, a bit of inspiration from other sectors, I think that there's a lot of stuff that could be progressed even within such a restrictive straitjacket as Teams to make a lot of this work. And it's experiments like yours on Friday and all the other things that you've mentioned, which certainly give me the kind of hope that I can start delving into how we've got Teams set up to try and keep it secure, of course, because it has to be secure, but kind of frees up people's creativity to use it in ways that we wouldn't really have thought of before.
Sharon, I referred to the voluntary sector and charities earlier. You have had some involvement yourself, haven't you, with a charity? I think I saw on your LinkedIn.
Yeah, so my dog is a pets therapy dog, so she's the big one right now. And so that gives us, she's had an assessment, and we were assessed, but she passed with flying colours, and that means we can go into care homes or schools and places like that with her. There's a particular thing that they do where they have children reading to dogs, and with at the moment the care homes were very closed down, but they're probably opening up now, so hopefully we'll be able to go to a local one that's just around the corner. Nice. Also, I had a stroke 10 years ago, so I'd been involved more at that time with the Stroke Association, and yeah, my partner has PTSD, so PTSD resolution is the next one on my list to kind of do something for. At the end of the first lockdown, just before we were able to go to the shops, I shaved my head for Mind, and I made £500.
Nice.
It wasn't quite shaved, but it was quite short. It was really annoying me though, so I needed a haircut. And people would say, "Why don't you just wait 2 weeks until you can go to the barber?" I said, "No, I want my full lockdown experience. I want to shave my head." So yeah, I've done a few different things.
Yeah. So in connection with that, how have you made sure that you've looked after your mental health and other people's mental and physical health while you've been, while things have been changing?
Yeah, really, really important. I suppose over the last 10 years since my stroke, I think my worldview has changed. I think when you go through something like that, you sort of reappraise things and think, actually, this is what's important, and that's not what's important. And so that still keeps me going, from that perspective. we've had to work really, really hard to get Mick the help that he needed, but he has had some help from an organisation called PTSD Resolution. They were fantastic, and they gave him a counsellor straight away. 6 sessions, off you go, and we went and met this woman. She was absolutely fantastic and has helped him, you know, no end. We also go to a local veterans hub where, again, you mentioned the Navy. We're based in Dorset and in Portland, around that area. He's very much in the minority, being ex-Air Force, and they let him know. Junior service, they say a lot. So, and so that's really lovely, because you've got a group of people who support each other, and it isn't necessarily overt. You know, these are big tufty guys who don't necessarily want to talk about their feelings all the time, but they've built a gym so people can do that. They have a thing called Mad for Dogs, so if you have a dog that supports you, you can take them along on a Tuesday or a Wednesday, and they get their own care and attention. They get some activities to do, which gives them some time, and they've got a really nice you know, cafe, restaurant and things like that, and we can just have a chat with people, and then they do things, you know, sponsored things and all sorts of things like that. So it's a really, really great thing.
I'm just looking on the website for PTSD Resolution, and it looks like a really good charity that gets on, that does what it says on the tin and gets on with it. So that's fantastic to know that that's out there. I was going to ask you something else. You spent some time with government digital services. How do you think it's, if you're able to say, what now that you're not so closely involved, what's your perspective on what they're doing now and what they should be doing, maybe, if you're able to say?
Yeah, it's difficult because you know, when I was there, it was 2014. It was quite it wasn't very early. You know,
I must have been right at the beginning of their operations.
No. That was about 2011 when they started.
Okay.
It feels like it was really
time
early.
passes more quickly.
It does. But certainly I was able to meet people like Tom Loosemore, Mike Bracken, you know, and the senior leadership people, Russell Davis, and someone else whose name I can't remember. I really apologise. And they were great, you know, really. And I think what was needed at that time was, you know, strong leadership and the mandate that had been given by Lord Malders now. And it was a lovely, lovely place to work. And I was part of the capability team. I was based in Leeds. Matt was based in Leeds. There were, you know, people in the office. And it taught me some of these early things about, you know, using Trello and working together. And one of the other things that they did a lot, and a lot of people there did, one remote, all remote, you know, so if you were on a call, you'd see people sitting next to each other, you know, and they'd all be on the same call, but they, you know, were talking like this. So you didn't have the difference of people in the room. You know, again, it's about equality, isn't it? It's about, you know, the experience that people are having. I myself, in a long time ago, when would it have been, 2000, I worked for a large telecoms company, and I was based in Leeds. I'd moved to Leeds to support the remote offices as WorldCom got bigger in the UK, and we had a spider phone then. It was well before the times of laptops and, you know, cameras and all that kind of thing. And people would just forget I was there. I'd be able to hear the 3 people around the spider phone, and that was it. No one would be kind of thinking, oh, Sharon needs to speak or whatever. And it was just a really lonely experience from that perspective. So that really has stayed with me. And then I worked with another organisation, and we had someone who'd started up in Canada. And so we had someone who would, you know, and it was often me, and I did this at Department for Education as well. You know, you got the laptop, and you were turning it around so that they could see people speaking, and you know, you were looking after them and making, and then you keep an eye on them, and if they wanted to say something, you'd say, you know, Dawn's got something to say, you know, and that
here's Dawn. Yes.
Here's Dawn. Yeah, hi Dawn. It's a ridiculous time for you, but usually.
Yeah. So I think, I mean, I was just talking about GDS. They have had a huge influence on you know, the whole way government works now. And like I was renewing my I was changing something on a government website at the weekend, and it was just so simple and it worked so very smoothly. And you know, because I know people like yourself and others who have worked in that system, it makes me feel very fond and very benign about the whole thing. But not everybody does, obviously. But I think it has made a big difference. And I'd like to see that happen. I'd like there to be a charity digital service that was equally, you know, sort of seeing that kind of, because the consistency and the kind of the, you know, across departments now is something that wasn't there before, and it does make a big difference, and it's a much better experience for the end user. So
every time I report a lateral flow test, I think, how would this have worked if the government digital service hadn't done all that work to get us
exactly
to the point where this was a natural thing to do?
Yeah, absolutely.
So whether or not they're directly behind that bit of the government website is irrelevant. It's the principles and the approach and the common design. And I really do think that's one of the things that's been very fortunate for us.
I know that they did have a lot. They had to respond, obviously, and lots of people worked on COVID services. One of my particular friends from the days when I was working on the academy, Angela, was brought in as a delivery manager on one of the high-profile COVID services, and you know, I think that as you say, you can see that the work that they put in at the beginning to make things consistent, and to, you know, and the constant work that happens on the design system to make things more accessible. So you can see things like, you know, if you've got a radio button, one of the sort of circular buttons that you pick one of, you know, say there's 3 options, you just pick one of them. The target area is bigger actually than the image, whereas in the old days it would have been a tiny little thing, and you've got to somehow, you know, and as someone with an ancient now RSI injury, it doesn't bother me now, but you know, that is really, you can understand, you know, how difficult it is. You know, someone's got Parkinson's, or you know, my mum has something that causes shakes that's not connected to anything else, and it just makes it much easier to hit the target. And it's just that constant focus on making sure that the thing is needed, that it's something that government should be doing. I mean, that's the thing. Government shouldn't be doing everything. Government should be doing what government should be doing, and shouldn't be doing what other people are doing, and they don't have a mandate to do. And the same with local government. I think that local government, lots of local government people in the years since I joined GDS, I've seen, you know, becoming either working together on local gov digital, or I used to live in Leeds, and they were fantastic, you know, and worked on lots of the local digital fund things. I worked directly on the Barnsley income management system, so they built their own income management system, and basically got rid of the incumbent, which is the incumbent for lots of local authorities, costs a lot of money, is very difficult to change, and all of those things. And it was just fabulous going around and doing research with lots of different councils and hearing the stories. And that was the show and tell that I talked about, where we used Mentimeter. Just a fabulous piece of work. And now, you know, we did the discovery. It continues on now. I think they're in public beta now. And the guy who is responsible for that writes week notes every week while they're working on it, and he publishes it on the internet. And it's about being open, and you know, so somewhere if you look hard enough, there's video of me. I hate video of me, but I'm old enough to not care about it so much anymore. You can find it if you want to.
Another great resource is week notes that you've referred to. Yeah, I mean, I keep promising myself I'm going to start with it, but I haven't yet. But I know that, like Hira Hussain, for example, who works for Chain, who founded Chain and works for them, uses it, and kind of that kind of working in the open, sharing what you're doing, the good and the bad, is it's such a vital piece of work, and it's overlooked and underappreciated, I think, still. But we'd like to see more of that. Sharon, I just wanted to quickly, I know when I emailed you, I asked you about whether you had any contact with John Popham when he was around. Have you got any memories of him that stick out?
Yeah. So John lived in Huddersfield. I lived in Leeds. I bumped into him. We were at all the same events. It's like these days, there are certain people who I'm always, we're obviously interested in the same things because we turn up at all the same events. And so, we'd be at the same events in Leeds. I'd see him just around generally. Gov camp, local Gov camp. I remember I learned about not Westminster from John from Twitter, unfortunately, because I was in Leeds. It was a Saturday. I was free. I could have gone, but I didn't know about it until he was there. And I felt like saying, "Can you let us know when you're going to be next week so I can book on?" But I've gone ever since then, and in fact, that's in February, on the 26th of February. And there's they're doing a really nice thing. I've just received an email actually, and they want us to talk about the one thing that we think local government needs right now, and they want us to do a video in memory of John, and there's some really nice piece on the website.
Fantastic. Oh, that's really good to hear. Oh, the family will be delighted to hear that.
Well, I think they know about it.
Yeah, so what's not Westminster, for those who might not know?
Yeah,
I'm
so
sharing the screen.
Yeah.
I mean, the piece where it says there, Not Westminster is a free event for everyone who has something positive to say about local democracy and anyone who is up for the challenge of making it better. And that's what it's all about. And look, there I am. That's better than the previous year's photo when I was right in the middle and waving. I think I deliberately hid behind someone that time. But again, I mean, this time I'm going to be like other people. I've got to travel all the way to Huddersfield, whereas normally I could just jump on the train. But now I'm in Dorset. It's it's definitely worth making. Yeah, but it's definitely worth making the journey.
That looks wonderful. Yeah,
that'll be really good. It is a lovely positive. Yeah,
it's great to hear that they're doing something to for memory of John.
Yeah, well, similarly when we had Gov Camp last year, I had a conversation with a couple of people. I proposed a session about how we should remember John. And I had a conversation with a couple of people, and we talked about, what the family wanted and, similar things. And what we talked about was maybe having particular things. When you run an open space, you talk about, the laws and the rules and that kind of thing. And that, you can leave a session if you want to and go somewhere else and that kind of thing. And we thought maybe what we could do is think about things where we could talk about specific people. So, talk about making videos, and that's about John. And then also we had another colleague who was a photographer who died a few years ago, who went to
David.
Yeah. And so we talked about, take lots of photographs and things like that, and just try and think about those people and what they brought to the community. And I know that I can't remember his surname, but Nick, who was Ministry of Justice, he did a lot of work with social media around the police.
Nick Booth.
Yeah, Nick Booth, that's it. And similarly, we were talking about him on Twitter. I mean, that's another thing. A lot of the community coalesces on Twitter. We talk on Twitter, even if we're not getting together. You can see what people are thinking about and that kind of thing. And I know that Amanda particularly was saying, I really miss him because this is my first Gov Camp since he passed. And so it's a nice way of remembering people and talking about people and that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's good to remind people that we're all human. We care about each other, and it's not just a job. We kind of invest. We spend so much of our life doing these things that it's investment of our emotions as well as our.
Yeah, a specific thing about John was he. You mentioned care homes earlier, and he used to go into care homes and teach them digital skills. And I particularly remember because he used to ask for volunteers to kind of dial into a call so that he could demonstrate it. And so I remember being that person, being in my office at the time and dialing into this thing and having hearing what people were saying about me at the other end. It was kind of like, look, there's someone there, that kind of thing. It was lovely. And he talked about one chap who didn't say anything the whole of the session, and just sat quietly, and I think you learn to see those people and then pick up with them during a break. I've had it in training courses where people have just been really quiet, and you don't know whether it's because they were made to come and they want to be there, they got something more important going on, or it could be any reason. And so you generally try and just speak to those people and say, are you getting something out of this? Is there anything else that you need? Blah, 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 whatever. And he did the same with this chap. And he said, oh yeah, he said, I'm really interested in music. You know, I used to sing a lot and play music. And so John showed him the things that you could do for free on, you know, on an iPad or something like that. And you know, I think that's the thing, you know, you learn to be aware of whether people are interacting or not, and just ask those questions, just be human. I think that's the thing.
Be human.
Yeah, absolutely.
Being human.
Yeah. The family established the Twitter handle Be More John after he died, and I think they I often copy things to that because it reminds me of him. And you know, we just miss him because he would have been, you know, he was in his elements, you know, establishing this program, and he just would have loved and kind of helped so many more people since lockdown started. But we do our best to carry on in his memory. Okay, Sharon.
You can hear funny noises. The dog is on her back.
I thought it might be. We have had dogs on the show before. We've come to the end, actually, of the program, Sharon. We're not going to talk about any more stories today, but it's been brilliant. You're a great guest, and we obviously could talk for a lot longer. So please do come back on the show again and tell us what you've been doing. If people want to find you online, as we often ask our guests, where's the best place to find you?
Twitter. My Twitter handle is Pixels, which is spelled Pixlz. That's the best place to find me.
And you can find a link to that in the description of this YouTube video.
Yeah.
Good.
Always easiest, and then everything else is linked from there.
Great. Thanks very much, Sharon. Thanks for joining us. Thanks, Sweyn.
Thanks,
I think it was
Thank
another
you.
great program. And thanks, everybody. And we hope you have a good week.
Have a good week.
Bye.